just another success that we've had for our classes. In fact, so much so, in the last 6 months, just the last 6 months, I've had 3 students publish. 1 in a local magazine, 2 and my friends, it's just the beginning for this program. The library has been an incredible success, but so is the Academic Success Center. So is the Career Development Center, providing services to our students. Internships that are leading to jobs. The majority of the students that I have probably, and I'd have to do the math, but I would say greater than 80% off the top of my head are getting the job. They're making positions. One of my students from last term, they made a position for her as an assistant administrator for a pediatrics practice. And that's exactly what we're here for. And we went global. We're not going to stay here in Florida. We're going to go everywhere. And so we... started in our inaugural class. They're going to complete it with a baccalaureate thesis. So we're going to raise the level of our students even more, which I'm very excited about. As for service to the college, a little bit closer back home, I've been honored to serve on or currently serving with committees such as the Health and Safety Committee, the Library Committee, the Endowed Teaching Chair Committee, the DCCRC and the CCCRC committees, and numerous, if you know me, search committees. And all that to help the college reach their ultimate goal of changing lives. I'm often asked what best practices I follow. Well, I have one primary one because I teach online. And that one best one is communication. Not just the skill of communication, but the art of communication. The ability to relay through written or verbal modes, care, concern, coaching, mentorship. You see, I find that students really do subscribe to the old adage, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. We do more than just teach a curriculum. We are counselors, mentors, coaches, sometimes a psychologist, all in addition to being a professor. We have to be their biggest fans, and through emails, announcements, discussion posts, monopoly videos, and even applications such as Zoom, I make sure that message is well received. Not because it's my job, but because I believe in it. I'm a lucky professor in that I'm also a program manager. The reach of my influence is greater in the vast number of students I get to interact with. From the start of 40 students in 2016 to now nearly 700, my reach is fantastic, and I can institute policies and procedures to help our students succeed. But I am often asked, what is my greatest accomplishment? And I'm asked that quite often. And it really is simple. It's that student who comes into my office at the beginning of the program and says, I can't succeed, I can't write, I can't research, I'm not a school person, I'll never be able to get my degree. And through some mentorship, some coaching, of course, and psychology, I get to watch them grow personally, professionally, intellectually. Eventually, I get to see them walk across that stage and reach for the outstretched hand of Dr. Lorenz as they receive their Bachelor of Health Science degree and enter industry, and in many cases, graduate school. They even come back time to time. One of my most recent professors that is starting in the summer is also one of my graduates. It's those students who they themselves never could see them do it, and then they finally do that, is my greatest trophy, and that's my greatest accomplishment. Too often, instructors are seen as barriers. And I've always worked hard to break that barrier down, to show students that I'm a mentor, a counselor, and an ultimate family. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, that kind of explains some of where I come from and all of my background. I would be more than happy to entertain any questions that you might have. Thank you. Thank you. It's been exciting. It's been very exciting. And Professor Donahue?
Thank you so much. Stay right here. Does the committee have any questions that they or discussions, follow-up that they would like to hear?
I approached Aaron Hanlon, and he was fantastic. And he had told me that they had a program called Honors in the Major. And the first part of that was identifying courses that we thought could be honors level courses. And we picked our core classes. Our degree is broken into core and specialization. And so we took some of our core classes like research methods, economics, law and ethics, and made them into honors level courses where they were more application type assignments. And we actually started noticing throughout all of our classes that we were already doing a lot of application assignments, so it was almost mirroring what Aaron was looking for. So I've worked with adjusting that course for the health sciences, and that's what we did. And actually, with Karen, and Karen's been an integral part of that. We switched over, changed the curriculum a little bit to match it into the health sciences, and started teaching over that. And actually, Dr. Kaufman is a professor for the course. Really exciting, and it's helping. It's helping, and it's taken a lot of frustrations, frankly, from a lot of professors because they felt that they were really just grading on a which they weren't really looking at content the way that they really wanted to. And now that's changing. That whole attitude is changing, that I'm able to evaluate content because that formatting is done. And they do really good, or it's just little tweaks here and there. And the graduate schools are appreciating it too. Rollins, as an example, was very impressive. We were writing an APA, and that the students would have some background. Former students have come back and said, thank you, I hated you in that class, but thank you because I passed my first master's paper, and so I'm really excited about that too. Yeah. And I wanted them to be essential. I didn't want them to be an ancillary tool. I wanted them to be an essential part of the program. Yeah. Minnesota is where it actually started. That was the first state, and we kind of expanded down to Georgia, South Carolina, and Colorado, and now it's really being picked up everywhere. Texas is another big state, and Florida, as usual, is kind of last in the race to get into it. The initial premise was to save money. Of course, it always comes to money. Hospitals get charged if you are readmitted within 30 days of your discharge for the same diagnosis. And so the community paramedics were designed to be a gap within there, a gap between the discharge and follow-up in primary care to make sure that those patients got what they needed, they understood their discharge instructions, they received their prescriptions, they were connected to other healthcare type of services that were needed until somebody else could come in and take over. An example, home health care sometimes can take 2 or 3 weeks to get into place. We have to have a nurse come out, they have to do an assessment, they have to put in their reports, and then of course by the time they get out there it's 2 to 3 weeks. If they haven't been receiving care, those patients end up back in the hospital. And then of course the hospitals don't get paid. So of course money was always the first initiative, but this is just a wonderful way to fill gaps and to provide access to care to patients who've never had access to care. And of course, if you're sick, where do you want to be? You want to be at home. And if we can manage you at home, then that's the best place to do it. Sure.
So much, Robert. I learned a lot. I think we all did. So we have about 10 minutes. Mary, you can start. If you want to start early, that's totally up to you. But there's some refreshments that Dr. Ross Nature was here for us in the back. Those of you at other campuses, you can find a refreshment. I'm sorry. Virtual, right? Do you want to take a few minutes, or we'll take a few minutes. We'll stay on schedule because I know some people are coming specifically for different people. So we'll start at 1 o'clock with Mary.
to do, and that's kind of where we are today. I'm not like Robert. I'm not going to stand behind a podium. It would just be too constricting for myself. Plus, I have the PowerPoint to kind of walk around and show you some of this. So I want to first bring your eye to that on the PowerPoint, all the pictures that you'll see basically came from my trips to Peru with our students. So if you're wondering, that is the Amazon rainforest and Amazon river rocks, and the beautiful rainbow. I thought that was the most awesome picture. So I wanted to make sure I shared it with everybody to start with. Okay, so what I do in my class every day is I look at this little sign on my desk that says, the best teachers are those who show you where to look but don't show you how you want to see. And I keep that in mind every time I walk into the classroom. And needless to say, as you're looking at this beautiful butterfly here, yes, that is a butterfly, that is an owl butterfly. It's just phenomenal. So until you actually know what to look for, maybe see. So some of the fun things that I do in my classroom, I like to do a lot of active learning in my classroom. I like to get the students out of their comfort zone. I like to get them involved in doing different things. So one of the things that I like to do is like this cellular brochure here. The students go through this process. They sit there and they come up with an analogy of how to make the cell relate to things that we know in everyday life, right? They come up with ideas like a castle, a circus. They have done things like a car or, amusement parks, and they bring everything back to the mind for them. And so as they continue through the classes, they always get the idea of, oh yes, I remember the trash can was the lysosomes. Got it. Okay. And so they can pull it back in. But it's not just the biology of the cell like that. We do a lot of things like that. I'm always getting them out of their comfort zone because that's what makes learning fun. And science is fun if you want to make it fun. You can have fun taking the project. And that's really what it's all about. When you hear them, oh, we're doing sciencey things today. Yes, we're looking at sheep brains, doing sciencey things today. That's exactly what we're doing. And so when we get these active learning processes going, like down here, the students are telling me all of the different parts of the skull because that's what they need to be learning. I shouldn't be telling them, they should be telling them. So we really embrace these kinds of activities. So I love doing it. And it makes it real for them. And that's the key. We always want to make it real for them. Another thing that I do is at the end of not every class, but a lot of my classes, I do these reflections with them. And I sit there and I'm like, okay, what did you learn today? How do you know you learned it? And what's the rest of the story? And so they sit there and they think about it. We get these classes going, and just the other day, 8 o'clock class, I'm sitting there, we're talking, we're having a great time at it. And all of a sudden I was like, and so when you sit there and it's 9:15 and you're like, it's 9:15, class is over. And they're all like, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize class was over. That's what it's all about, right? So when we sit there and we're reflecting, doing all of this, and they are still there and they want more, what's the rest of the story? Where are we going? So now I got them ready to come back next week to that 8 o'clock class without looking. Other things I do a lot of review sessions and help sessions for my students. I also do a lot of online presentations. I like do quick little videos of myself so that they can see it. I record all of my lectures for them so that even if they miss class or they want to go back and see a little part of that lecture again, I sit there and I do that. Our general biology review lab sessions that I do, I share those videos with everybody in the department, and they can share it with their students. I cannot tell you how many times I'm at Publix or I'm at Arby's or Target. You're that teacher who did that biology review session. I passed biology because of that. Thank you, thank you. And it's like, when I hear that from my students, I love it. When I hear it from other professor students, it makes me feel even better because I know I'm reaching out there to meet and They're the best, right? We collaborate on so many different things, on our lab books, we do the biology colloquiums, we have book clubs, we gather together, we work together as a fabulous team, and it is just awesome. I love the department, I love the people I work with, and I love what we do and how we can bring all of this to the students, because that's what it's all about, right? I also am very involved in several different leadership roles. I was in the Leadership Academy class of 2010, 2011. And since then I've been part of the council, and so I've been able to see others go through the academy and experience and have this introduction to the college and everything else that nobody else has had, or hadn't had up until that point. We are, making those relationships, right? We make the relationships that will go on, and now I can call Paul, say, hey, Paul, I need this, or Dahlia in counseling, and it's like, I know these people because of leadership now, and I built these relationships that are just phenomenal, and that's what it's all about when it comes to, being a part of that great community. I'm also faculty senate at large representative. I was second vice president for a number of years. I've been on the TDL committee, all of the different committees throughout. There's so many to list. It's like, but it's all part of what we do every day, right? I've also been a presenter at multiple conferences, the National Association of Biology Teachers. I've presented about 4 times at that conference. I've presented at the STEM Tech conferences. I've also done a lot of different publisher review books for their textbooks. I've many, many, many things like that. I've also done a lot of ancillary work. So I've written higher level Bloom's questions for some of our national books out there that are not only touching our students here, they're touching students everywhere. So they're challenging students, they're giving them what they need somewhere else, right? And that's one of the big complaints that I had about our textbook that we use right now is they didn't have those questions. And so the publisher reached out to me and said, will you write them? And I said, absolutely. And so it was one of those great things that I've been able to help out and enhance our textbooks, so that our students get the best learning experience. I've also been a digital faculty consultant, so I'm helping faculty members put things online and get familiar with doing all of that. So it's not just at Seminole State. I have done that across the country. So I am going far on top of everybody else, right? And the last is, of course, what I've done with the students outside of the college. And I have had some tremendous experiences. I have had the pleasure of traveling with Dr. Saki to New Mexico with a group of some fabulous ladies in the Women in Science travel class, and it was amazing. One of the ladies that came out of that was Haley Allison, is one of our Jack Kent Scholarship winners. Just amazing to open up these students' eyes to, you go from Florida to New Mexico. There's a huge difference, and the restrictions on the water and everything else, they just embraced all of it. It's such a great program that I was able to be a part of with her. I've also had the pleasure of traveling to Peru with students, with Professor Saki, Professor Nusanov, and different for the last 4 years. And let me tell you, you want to get out of your comfort zone, travel to the Amazon rainforest, okay? These students are experiencing things like they would never experience before. It is amazing what they're coming home with. The very first year, Kate Candle, another Jack Kent Scholarship winner. She was on that first trip to Peru. Our second trip to Peru, Emily Gerhardt, who is a finalist this year for Jack Kent Scholarship. So we're making these women and these students experience things and just want to continue to pursue and know they're not our students, but they are our students because they're taking it from us, and I've taken our college through there, and that has just been a phenomenal experience as well. One that I never thought that I would participate in. And I'm going to wrap it back up with getting out of that comfort zone, where I get the students up out of their comfort zone. Trust me when I say they get me out of my comfort zone. All right? I have had an entire lifetime of the biggest fear of spiders, and the Amazon is filled with them. Our very first trip down there, one of the students was like, we were talking the last day, what was your favorite part of the whole trip? And he was like, my favorite part of the whole trip was anytime somebody said, look at that beautiful spider, I looked at Mary. And it was like, because Mary was not thinking it was a beautiful spider by any means, trust me, okay? But you get to see the ugly bug, and that's pretty much his name translated in English is ugly bug. Snakes all over the place, and the tarantula. So, Jimmy, if you want to go ahead and show how somebody can get out of their comfort zone in the Amazon. Maybe. Just down on the bottom. Oh, there is sound. He's holding the spider. Thank you. He's a big guy, yeah. That beautiful spider there, and yes, I have to say beautiful spider, had decided to build a nest in Professor Newsonoff's pants as we were sharing our room together. So he decided her pants instead of our room, which was, I guess, a good thing, my bed. But let me tell you, this house, you heard how scared I was. We went on a night swamp walk after that, and all I could think was how traumatized I was. And all I kept thinking is, if I get back and he's still there, I'm going to actually touch it. You have no idea how much I was really afraid when we got back. He had decided to crawl somewhere else. But it has definitely gotten me out of my comfort zone. And that's the students' zone. And that's some of my teaching experiences.
I'm so impressed with all these presentations. So thank you, Mary. Questions from the committee? Oh, there have been, I would say 100 different obstacles, really just initially starting off, it's probably one of the biggest obstacles, but transitioning into this new way of learning, I think, has probably been one of the biggest challenges most recently, of making sure that, you're giving these digital natives something to keep them stimulated all the time, because I'm not a digital native by any means. So that's kind of one of those things that I've seen transition through the years and students changing through the years and needing to really adapt and change with them. And that's a huge challenge when you start to think, I want to be up here just talking, and they want to be out there not listening to me talk. So I've tried to embrace that
we do projects before they go. They have to research things on South America. They situations, issues, the gold mining, or the putting of the Amazon road through and things like that. So they're researching before we go, and then when we get down there, it's amazing when you're riding down the boat on the river and you see the gold mine. Like, no, it's just over here. So they talk about the logging, and we drive through a logging camp. So they get to learn about it before they're presenting on it beforehand, and then they're experiencing it after. Yeah, we leave. We're gone usually 10 days. So it goes right into Sunday. Yay for spring break. And it's not really this week. We hike every day, like multiple times every day. We go on hour-long swamp walks. There's like every tree you go to touch. Yeah, it's fun. Yes, go ahead. Oh, great. Well, there's another one that my husband did send to me. We did watch like the week before I went with the indigenous people packing, eating the school trip that got, their plane crashed and then they got captured and then they were all eaten. Yes, the Green Inferno. Oh, yeah, he made me watch that one. Sure. Yeah, don't watch it. Or do, and then come to the Amazon. Yes, new meaning to global engagement.
Well, thank you very much. So we're moving along a little ahead of schedule. At 1:30, we have Frankie Albrin.
Okay,
minutes. And
okay.
really, I just a quick.
Just go for it.
Yep.
How many?
I'd like to introduce, it's my honor to introduce Frankie Albritton, our next distinguished professor candidate.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me, distinguished colleagues, my friends here. So I really appreciate that and your support. So yeah, when I found out about this distinguished I'm a first-generation college student, but my father was in the Army 25 years. We're originally from Florida, probably one of the older families in Florida. And so we moved back here, and actually, I was just thinking about this not too long ago. I actually ran a cross-country meet. I went my senior year, Lake Brantley High School, and so that was a good memory. Didn't win, actually didn't even come close to winning, you know. So that was my first introduction to SCC. Since then, after that point, I went into the military and I did military service. And then, coming back to Central Florida, I really was open as to what I was going to do. And then I remembered probably that cross-country meet. And kind of like what happened today. I mean, that's why I think it's super important that we bring the students in, because you don't know the impression you'll make. I know that from my children, when I gave them words of advice, you think they're ignoring you. And then not too long after that, what happens? They're doing what you told them. And so I think that goes with a lot of our students as well. So yeah, I graduated in 1982. I had some wonderful faculty members. It was probably one of the things that really brought me back to higher education, was remembering people like Dr. Tipton. I remember Dr. Tipton, Senator Colter Burback. What I really enjoyed too was, and teaching in several places, I saw some movement of faculty for whatever reasons. I really enjoyed the fact that Cindy was always here, and I could always go back and visit her and talk to her and get encouragement and advice. And one of the things, and I know I've been on hiring committees with some of you, that we tell the candidates is that when people come to Seminole State, they stay. And so it's a great place to be. Something that really motivated me to get into higher education. So once I left Seminole State, SEC back then, I was on Dr. Weldon's presidential scholarship, so I went to the University of Florida, and so I carried my Seminole State background even through there. Several years of executive experience. I worked for, everybody remembers Burdines and their headquarters in Miami, so that was very exciting. They were, of course, a division of Federated Department Stores, Macy's, I think was with them as well. So that was Bloomingdale's. Anyway, that was fun. And then I went to work for the University of Maryland in Europe, given that my background, probably, like I said, was in the military for many years. I knew there was a program over there, and I did some administrative work for them. And then came back to the United States, went out to New Mexico, Santa Fe Community College. I think one time I was in an interview somewhere, and I told them that, I taught at SFCC, and they said, oh, the one, of course, near Gainesville, right? There's another one out in New Mexico. It was a beautiful place to go ahead and be. So that's my overall background. Why I'm here today, I think I have a distinguished record of academic scholarship, international experience, college leadership, character and service, and teaching excellence. Obviously, I believe in those things, and I want to go ahead and demonstrate those today. We all know I'm not the boastful type, but I guess that's why I'm here today, right? So please take that with a little bit of grain of salt. And I also want to give a couple of examples of what I'm doing as far as best teaching practices. Good. So one of the things that I've done is I've tried to go ahead and stay very relevant in publishing. I have 19 scholarly publications, 3 refereed journal, 3 of those are refereed journal, a book on healthcare reform, which I think we still need. I think some of us would agree with that, maybe all of us, I don't know. Also, and one of the journals that I'm pretty proud of is my paper in the Journal of Language for International Business. Went ahead and took a look at clip art, for instance, and compared various groups their impressions from around the world, students in the U.S., students who are in the U.S. studying, students who are outside of the U.S., and compared their perceptions of just seeing a picture like that. Because oftentimes when you get a picture like that in your mind, that really calls upon the cultural background. So many examples in there. Also, I've kind of branched in because sometimes you can't get the point across to some of our students today unless it's more like edutainment, and we all know that. So I branched out into a little bit of independent publishing. I've written and put out there in the market 3 novels. So I'm really proud of that as well. The main theme is economics, fit into a nice story about gold, and a conspiracy, and so all the things that we love. And so I think that I've done a pretty good job in that area. And everything I've probably done at the college and probably before has been based upon my stern belief that we really need to internationalize education. I mean, it's one big world, and I think the more we know others in this world, the more they know us, the fewer problems we're going to go ahead and have. So everything I've done has been kind of prefaced by that thought. I've taught in the University of Maryland's MBA program for several years. I was a full professor in that capitalized on my 6 years of teaching over there as a faculty member. I've always gone back to Germany every break that I've had to go ahead and teach for a week or teach for a couple of days. The nice thing about Germany is their schedule is a little bit different from ours. So, they go almost all the way through the summer until July. So oftentimes I could take off from, when we ended here in May to go ahead and spend several weeks, and they've always been very accommodating. I've done that at the University of Applied Sciences in Stuttgart, Munich, and Ingolstadt. And one of my contacts at Ingolstadt led to one of our programs here. Actually, they have a pretty big automotive industry in Germany, and so it's really, I think, paid off. I was just looking at, I don't come over here that often, but I was like super impressed by the automotive area. So it's amazing. And of course, spent last summer in China, and that was an excellent experience. And so I really appreciate all the work that others have done to set up programs like that. I know it's a lot of work. Whenever I get the chance, I bring in speakers. For instance, here's a case where I brought in the Honorable Minister Manburi Njie to go ahead, and he's the Finance and Economics Minister of the Gambia. It was a perfect segue into what I was doing because I was talking about tariffs. And he started to go ahead and talk about how in West Africa they wanted to go ahead and build closer relationships with members of other states to go ahead and create along the lines, as whether it's the North American Free Trade Agreement or whether it's the European Union, more cooperation, versus competition. And so he really spoke to that, and he talked about our competition with China and how China is also really vying for the resources and the leadership in China, and that was a real eye opener, I think, for so really internationalization has been my real forte, and I really enjoy doing that, and I think the students get a lot out of it as well. I'm really grateful and appreciative of how the college has really taken off in that area over the last. I know I've worked with Dr. Ross, early on, and to see how it's developed is like it's amazing. So several years ago, I worked also as far as leadership at the college, working on the Title III grant. Dr. Ann Rifo brought the grant to the college. I mean, she was instrumental and wonderful in doing that, almost a $2 million grant. And I think it really had an impact on students. Dr. Wright initially led the program, and I took over once he retired. One of the things that I saw was that we really needed to go ahead and prove that we were having an impact. And so I saw that, okay, looking at the numbers, okay, we have to really establish a method for doing that. And I worked with Dr. Hammond to go ahead and establish what I morphed into our TICO system. So it was, kind of started that way. In any event, so we really were able to measure what we were doing, and it was some fantastic results. Along with Dr. Mark Morgan, and our program administrator, Dr. Alejandro Guillard, we went ahead and published a paper in the Journal of Developmental Education, which had some amazing results. They sound fantastic, but let me tell you, I mean, we all know Mark Morgan. He's got an excellent handle on the numbers, and he did everything, and we worked on this. A 21% return, okay, on the investment to have students complete. And so it's amazing. And of course, with certain groups, it was it was a greater return than other groups. And so I was really proud of that work that we did. I worked with Jim Henningsen, and one of the things he congratulated me on is that we almost spent every dollar of the grant, which is of course very important. Sometimes you don't want to spend more, but you don't want to spend less either. So getting that right number. So I don't think we had a couple of dollars left. One area where that's still paying off for the college is, of course, in our Faculty Institute. There was a grant associated with that, an endowment, and we're still working on that today. Working from that today. Okay, good. I'm very proud. Probably the proudest thing is, that I passed on my love of country and my military service to my two daughters. My daughter's a graduate of West Point. One's at West Point currently. There I am up at the top, in my military experience. Probably can't recognize me. I'm kind of like second from the left there, or in the middle back there. So kind of a fresh-faced guy. And I still work with the West Point community in Central Florida, and also with military groups, veterans. So teaching. I think I've done an excellent job with teaching. There's been, and I explain this in my application, there's been a metamorphosis, I guess you can call it. I was a little bit more stern with the students, trying and say, all right, here's where you need to come up to, and you need to make sure that you do your homework, do this, do that, and get to that level. But I've learned over the years, you got to be flexible. Okay, and I think we all know that. For instance, there was one student, he was on an athletic scholarship from somewhere, a football player, and he came here and he wanted to go ahead and he had to get a B in economics. And so he wasn't doing that well, missing homework assignments, and he came to me and said, well, what can I do? And generally at that point I was, okay, you missed that assignment, in order to, to imply a lesson, I wouldn't necessarily be flexible. I would say, all right, you've got to go ahead and you can move forward. But to get that B, that was out of the question. So I said, all right, yeah, you can do some of the previous exercises, homework that you missed, okay? And he really got on top of it. He was very motivated. He knew he had to get a B. I don't know why it was just a B in economics to get that scholarship again. And he did. And I'm really proud of that. And he came to me and said, how can I repay you? And I said, well, go ahead and name your first interception after me. He was a defensive back, right? So over the years, sometimes you don't know, like I was saying when I first started, you know the impression you're going to make on students. Right? Well, a couple of students have nominated me for Who's Who. I don't even know who they were. It's kind of, I guess, anonymous process, but I'm proud of those. I maintain my currency in the field by oftentimes not just teaching, but by working for companies. We had a great program, I don't know, probably 10 or 15 years ago with Siemens, where they were doing internships for faculty. And I really took advantage of that, even worked beyond the internship and worked for them a little bit longer. And that was an amazing experience, and also did that for Daimler-Benz in Germany for a summer. I think I've really improved as far as my student retention over the years. Now I think I'm very high at that level. Again, giving students not necessarily breaks, but giving them more chances, and that's one of the things that I've learned that you really have to do. We're not all just right out of the gate motivated. Some need that extra help, and okay, they'd say they had some kind of medical or I'm less about asking about give me the proof. Because why? In my opinion, I don't want to do that. Give them a chance, and I think that's really worked out very well, and I see that with my consistently higher numbers for them succeeding. And so some of the things I do in the classroom and online. One of the things I remember what I pointed out was that I was early on an adopter of online education. 1998 is when I first taught my first online course here. And one of the things I guess I got, go back, the word at the top right was from, I think that was University of Jacksonville, giving an award for the leadership that I showed there. And I've enjoyed online teaching. I mean, we all have our pros and cons there. But one of the things that I found is that for the student who can't make it to campus, and I knew that from being in the military, sometimes you just can't do it. But you don't want to exclude those students, and I think that's a great thing that we've really fleshed that out over time. In any event, so one of the things I do in class, how am I on time? I'm doing pretty well, getting close. One of the things that I do in class is I use clickers every single day, and one of the things that does is allows me to de-emphasize the tests and the quizzes, and basically whether they know it or not, every day is a little quiz. So we go over the material, and I think it encourages punctuality because I give extra credit right at the beginning of class. I let them work in twos. Okay, I say, and one of the things I say is if you use your cell phone anytime in class, I don't care if you do, but you can't work with anybody else. And that really, without me being the bad guy, decreases the amount of cell phone use. And engagement, I think. So it's not innovative in the sense of, nobody else does it, but I think doing that, encouraging the teamwork and things like that really help. And just one of the things I go through, and this is an example of how it works, I go through versus monetary policy, and it's an involved subject, and so then I ask them a question. After we go through it, I say, how many of you believe fiscal is better, or how many believe monetary better? And this is an example of what they said, and then we go through, and I do like a little checklist, and what I find then, I ask them the same question again after we go through the checklist, and then I get, the correct answer. So I see, there's a payoff there, of course, once we go through that, because we spend a couple of days going through the pros and cons, and then the summary is that checklist, and then I see that they get it, and that's one of the payoffs, I think. And in online, what I've done is gone ahead and established a blog that goes over some of the same things I talk about in class, death and taxes and economics and literature. But one of the things I do is I apply that as well to literature. So I get examples where I say, okay, here's something where they talked about unemployment. One thing that comes to mind with unemployment is the Cinderella Man. Remember the movie where he's unemployed during the Great Depression? So that I try to bring that in. One of the neat ones is one of the scrolls, or what are they and this first Star Wars, the Crawl, when it goes through and it talks about the Empire or whatever. Well, one of the movies, it's the main theme, it's a revolt against taxes. Okay, and so that's what leads to this gigantic revolution. And so I talk about taxes, and one little quotation, the art of taxation consists in so plucking the goose as to obtain the largest possible amount of feathers with the smallest possible amount of hissing. And that was John Baptist Colbert who said that. And so, taxes, everybody hates them, but they don't necessarily understand them. And then when they see that, that it's also in literature, also in our history, then I think they get it better. And so I assign some of my online students to go ahead and take a look at that, and go ahead and make a post inside of their course. Right. So I think that's it. Any questions? Questions? Anybody have any questions? I think we got. Okay.
So now the time is for the committee. Did you have any inquiries, discussion, or questions?
Great.
Always. First of all, what a class for the past, those are the names you dropped there.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Making me feel old. I love that you said that you're giving your students chances. Sometimes I feel like I'm not dumbing down my courses,
Right.
but I'm not setting them up for success in the workplace.
Sure.
And I used to think it was prior military. A lot of my adjuncts also are prior military. And I've learned I've got to soften up a little bit.
Right.
We're not at the Air Force Academy or what's
Yeah.
It took a while for me to figure that out, but it has really helped our students be more successful.
Right.
And the fact that you do the clickers every
Right.
before class, I think that does help.
Help get them to class.
And
All these little incentives.
And class preparation.
Right.
I'm trying to do a presentation on that right now.
Yeah.
It's hard to teach but I love that I'm hearing from other departments they're doing that too.
Sure.
Because I don't want to be the easy one.
Right. Yeah, you don't want to race to the bottom, and I don't think it is. I'm just trying to go ahead and give them additional, okay, they come to me and they say, well, I couldn't make this deadline. Before was more so, well, you didn't make the deadline, next time you will.
And
But
you don't want to hear the excuses.
you don't want to hear the excuses.
They're real half the time.
Right. But I find that if I give them like this one student. She was doing pretty well, but then she stopped for some reason. I contacted her and said, why? And then she told me the problem she was having. I gave her extra chances. Then she needed extra chances. Then she needed extra chances. But she completed. And so I thought that was, a success. And this other, the football player I was telling you about, he came to me and said, I need some extra, and I gave it to him, and he did well. Otherwise it might have been just locked out, and who knows what would have happened to the rest of his, career.
Those little things impact them so much.
Sure, sure.
I mean, it goes a long way.
Right,
Everyone's got
right.
it nominated.
Yeah. Well, it's a learning experience for us too. I mean, I've learned. Hopefully, I don't stop learning. All of us. So, thank you. Yes. I speak German fluently. First time I was there I was 6 years old, and my wife is from Germany. Tried to get my daughters to speak German. The older one really worked out. But I teach mainly in English. They want us to teach in English, and I try to hide it that I can speak German. But then sometimes when I say their names in class, they figure out that I have at least good pronunciation, and so I don't. Sometimes at the end I spring it on them. But yeah, it's better that they don't know that. So. Good. Well, I appreciate your attentiveness. Yeah, and thank you very much. Yeah. This proves that I'm old school, right? SEC. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And next at 2 o'clock will be Ben Taylor.
get it. It'll work.
Okay, we're going to start in about another minute, and we'll be able to be honored by Ben Taylor. 1 minute. Okay, it's 2 o'clock. We're going to start with our next distinguished professor presentation will be Ben Taylor.
Good afternoon, and happy Valentine's Day. Hope you have wonderful plans for this evening. I was told I need to, if I do this, I can still, go outside. In general, I could spend 2 hours talking about my kids, my wife, even my dogs, but I really don't like talking about me. So my wife said, you have to do this. You have to at least give them a good background. So I'm going to do a quick overview of me, and then we'll move on to more interesting things. But I started out, had a bachelor in physics
from a small school up in Tacoma, Washington, University. Continued on at University of Washington in a master's in physics, and while I was doing that, I started working for professional services companies, what they call themselves. They had a lot of contracts with Boeing up there, doing different engineering, applied physics type of things, and actually got an opportunity to go to the Arctic back then. Went on the CIREX, Coordinated Eastern Arctic Experiment. Saw polar bears. We did stress and strain measurements out on the ice. It was interesting. And then, this was the mid to late 80s, and computers and particularly networking was just really starting to grow. And there were, it was an area that this company in particular wanted to get more involved in. We had a number of projects that we got contracts with Boeing and with some other companies in the area. And so that was kind of the direction things started going. Along those same lines, I decided to get a master's in, it was actually an MBA, MIS, Management Information Systems, so it was kind of along the technology lines. And that was at Pacific Lutheran University in Tacoma. And that university also had an opening for a systems manager position for their mainframe systems along with their networks and such. And I was like, this is a good opportunity. It's closer to my house. I can go to school and work same place. So I started working at Pacific Lutheran. And I guess it was one winter, it was actually April, but we got snow, and my wife said, I don't want to live here anymore. And I said, okay, let's go south. And I've always loved Florida. And there was a job opportunity up in the Panhandle, Shalimar, Florida, consulting company that actually did IT support at Eglin Air Force Base. And so we moved down there. And actually that was an interesting move 23 years ago with three little kids, one really little kid at 6-month-old, and the government moved us down south. So that was kind of an interesting time, and we kind of took our time, but it was I'm talking too much now. In general, I enjoyed the technology. I've always enjoyed the technology. But I also found that kind of my area of expertise, or the area that people recognize, is that I enjoyed working with the users. Taking users where they are. A lot of times they didn't understand the jargon. They didn't need to understand the jargon. They wanted to know how to use the technology to get work done. And so that was something that I was good at explaining that. So there was a lot of individual training. I also did some training in groups and such at the time. And so that was kind of how when I first started recognizing, I really do enjoy the teaching side of things. And so opportunity came to come down to Central Florida for a consulting job. So we came down here, and within a year, I saw an opportunity at Seminole Community College, and applied for that, and started back in 1999. Initially, I was a professor and in the networking engineering department. It was a very the growth in network engineering was just really big at that time. There were a lot of people that wanted to get into it. And so our programs were growing. They were growing significantly. And within 4 months, I became program manager for one of the programs because they needed somebody, and I was able to, I'd done some program management in the past. So a year and a half later, I was department chair of network technologies and internet technologies, or actually network technologies and digital media technologies. It's been a long 20-some years. And I started recognizing that I can do some of this administrative stuff, but what I really, what I came into academia for was to teach students. So an opportunity came up actually where they needed an interim dean for business and information technology, And I said, sure, I'll do it, and I'm not going to apply. So this is a 1 year, and they did national search and everything, so that worked out actually good for all of us. And I sealed the fact that I don't want to do administration at that time. Not that there aren't great administrators, and I appreciate administrators. I just don't want to be one. So since then, I've been kind of working my way down to being just a professor again. Last year, I passed off the last of my program manager duties on someone else, and so now I'm just teaching 100% in the classroom again, so, or in the classroom or virtual classroom for the most part. Okay, kind of general ideas. You know, the community college, state college environment is, you know, an area that fits what my beliefs really well, because I really believe if students are given the tools, given the, you know, supporting their learning styles, that, you know, students can learn. When it comes to IT, they may need a little bit of aptitude, but, you know, we can kind of help them along with that too. People want to do IT, we can get them there. They got to work at it. They have to put the effort in. So that's the one thing. But, you know, this no barrier to entry type environment is good, I think, for the IT area in particular. Also in our area, we really started looking at e-learning relatively early on. You know, we were involved with grants with other colleges in the area, and the technology folks would say, "You're teaching this online? How can you teach this online? I mean, students need to have their hands on the computers." And, you know, we had actually developed a number of, you know, we used videos, demos, we provided files and information they needed to help set systems up at home. They also had opportunities in the lab. We had swappable hard drives so they could set up a small network, or at least a server, and so they were able to actually get hands-on one way or another. And, you know, as we've kind of developed our online programs, you know, back in the early days, one of the things that all the studies would say is, you know, no significant difference. That was kind of the goal of every study when they compared campus environment to online environment. That was the goal. In my mind, it was, you know, we can have a significantly different situation for online technology courses because we can take advantage of the technology. We can take advantage of, I mean, one thing about it that we do a lot now is, you know, students are not only encouraged, they're pretty much required to develop some of these remote administration, remote communication skills because of how we do our online classes. They have to communicate with me. They have to be able to explain if they're having an issue. And so we have some ways that we try and help them do that, and then, you know, we can help them move along. The other thing is keeping students engaged. That's always an issue with online classes. And we've used a number of different things, animation and videos, virtualized lab environments, and then continuous interaction opportunities. And I'll talk about each of these here. One thing we started using a while back, actually, the tool Go Animate is, you know, it's now called Beyond, but it's a really pretty easy tool to develop animations, and, you know, those things tend to draw in students pretty well. So we've used that. Powtoon is another one. Movely is a little more advanced and does some additional things. And so we've got some tools. If we have some time here at the end, I'll show a little 2-minute animation. The other thing is to, you know, utilize the videos that are out there. Besides making your own animations and videos, there's stuff out there. There's a lot of junk on YouTube, but there's also some good stuff. If you go out and look for it, it's important to, you know, make sure, you know, check it all the way through. You can get yourself in trouble if you know, make sure you review the videos before you put them on your site. Closed captioning is another thing to check closely because that can be really poor sometimes. But there's some good stuff out there. It takes a little bit of time to find it, but it's definitely an opportunity to integrate some videos in your class. The other thing for our IT area is the Professor Messer. Can you click on that icon, sir? This only goes forward, maybe backwards, but it doesn't open stuff up. Professor Messer has created a bunch of 5 to 10 minute videos. They're very specific in what they talk about. They are well closed captioned, but even better than that, he includes a full script of the video, and students can cut and paste that and go in and use it for notes and such. So these Professor Messer videos have been really good, and they're free to the students. He provides free videos. They're in the technology areas, our foundational courses in particular. He has videos for those. So I integrate those in, I create a link in my Canvas site, and where those videos are appropriate, provide them for the students. Okay, can you go back to the PowerPoint? There we go. Okay, continue. I can continue. Okay. The other thing is the virtualized environments. As I mentioned, when we first started out, a lot of what we were kind of stuck with was doing demo videos so students could see. I could go out and create users, do a video showing network administration, creating users and such. There were also some basic simulation, and so we would use those early on. Demos are still useful. If students are having an issue with something, I can go out and show them how to do it, and so I can still create some demo videos. For our, in the last few years, Cengage has actually developed a whole set of these MindTap simulation virtual labs that fit with our technology areas. And so, can you click on the MindTap from Cengage real quick here? No, the other one. Yeah, that one first. And what they actually do, they have a pretty sophisticated environment. If you look at that column there, it shows a series of systems. Students can start up the systems. On the left side over there, they've got detailed step-by-step instructions, and then on the right side is an actual, it shows the desktop for, what is this, a Win 8.1, so it's the Windows 8.1 system. But you can see if it's a Windows 10, there's a 7, there's a server, there's a Linux server, a Unix server actually in that case. So, there's opportunities for students to actually get that hands-on. And the other thing about, the real world out there, a lot of the, can you click it? This isn't clicking for me. Whoops. Okay, and another one that we use for the advanced classes is the NetLab virtual labs. It's it's more sophisticated. It's a little bit more, the students have to, the other thing about MindTap is that it actually creates automatic authentication because it links with the LMS. And so students don't have to log in again and deal with all that. So it works very well for our more foundational courses. For the advanced courses, we use NetLab, which creates a more robust environment. Go ahead and click on the NetLab link there, if you wouldn't mind. They have a login. Go ahead and click again. This is their home page. They can schedule their lab time. One more. And so you can see, in this case, these are much, they're more sophisticated type lab environments. The one on the left there is for our ethical hacking class. They've got multiple servers. They've got a firewall. And they can click on the individual objects, and it brings up actually brings up the system, and it goes through a process for that. We also have the multiple environments. We've got a Windows one. This one here is a VMware, which has multiple VMware servers. Go ahead and click on the icon, the VMware one over here. That. Just any of them, because I'm going back. Now I can go forward. Okay. Last thing, student interaction. And last, but certainly not least, in a lot of ways probably the most important thing. There's a number of different things to try and make sure and that students know you're out there and that you're out there for them and you're out there to support them. One thing I've probably been doing it at least 5 to 7 years, is I've created the nickname list. I have a spreadsheet. I essentially pull in the rosters, create a spreadsheet, and for all my classes, the first week we do a graded introduction. And students within that graded introduction will provide me some useful information. You know, there may be some things that I want to remember about them. Most important thing, the thing that really makes a difference for them, I think, is getting their nickname, getting what they actually go by. Instead of the Canvas name, which, you know, there's not a whole lot of people that go by William. You know, it's Bill or Billy or whatever. So I create my nickname list. I've got a copy of it on my phone. I've got a copy on computer at work, computer at home. They are password protected, so, you know, I'm not allowing any information to be accessed. But when students send me a message, they don't always sign it. I mean, they're kind of, it's the texting world, and they just, you know, tell me they're having an issue of some sort. But I'll respond back, you know, take a second or two, respond back using their nickname. And that really, you know, you can just tell that develops some rapport with students. The other thing is, particularly in the IT area, having an organized course site is really helpful. Organized, consistent. There's a lot of IT folks, they want organization. That helps them, you know, move through the material and such, and so I try and provide that. Communication tools, in general, there's several different opportunities to communicate. I've used chat, whiteboard. The one I use consistently and probably most effectively is just the, you know, inbox, the messaging. You know, I make sure that I'm available to communicate with the students, particularly during my virtual office hours, obviously. I'm sitting at my desk, normally, you know, grading things or doing whatever. So, you know, students want to respond during that time, they're going to get pretty immediate feedback. But one thing I've started doing also to my wife's, initially she was like, what in the world are you doing? I've got this with me all the time. Canvas teacher has actually gotten pretty decent. It was not very good for a while. You couldn't text back to or email back to students very well, and, you know, not have it missed lines. It was not very good. It's gotten a lot better. So, you know, I have this with me all the time. And one thing that happens in IT is, you know, students are working on labs, and they may be working anytime, day or night, on these because of their schedule. And so, you know, I'm always notified when I get an email, so I know it. And if I have the sound on, which my wife has made me turn it off a lot because it can be a little annoying, especially on a Wednesday night when things are due. But I've got it. I can go in. I can use Inbox. I'll tell students. I mean, this is part of that training them to do good remote communication, troubleshooting, that type of thing. Give me the details. I don't mind a long message. Give me details of what your issue is and attach screenshots, which they can do. I can actually bring it up on my phone. I can go to the screenshot. I can zoom in, and I can normally see what the issue is relatively quickly, and so I can get back to them right away. And pretty much on a daily basis, students say, wow, thanks for the quick response. I mean, it's something they definitely notice. They know you're out there. Maybe, you know, well, actually, I know there's times when students don't appreciate it. It's when they email me at 10:30 on the night that the stuff's due, and they say, my system's not working, I'm having issues, and there's no way I can make the time. Well, if I email back at 10:32 and say, well, your issue is you've got, you know, pop-ups blocked or something, that I can kind of hear the groaning on the other end. But it's good. It helps them be successful, and they don't have the excuse of not being able to get a hold of the professor. Now, one thing I don't do is I don't advertise that I do this. I won't put that in the syllabus, but, you know, I am available for them as much as I can be reasonably. I mean, I'll be at line at Disney. My wife, she's actually come to the point of accepting it, I think, that, you know, I may take a second while I'm waiting in line for Millennial Falcon, you know, which we have gone on a few times. But I guess that's about it. Do I have time for the animation? I really don't, do I?
Stay here. Thank you. So what we're going to do now is have any discussion or questions from the committee.
Technology has definitely grown a lot over the past since 1999.
Yeah.
Of course, the biggest challenges we've had in keeping up progress.
It's a matter of, you know, staying on top of things, going to conferences, going to, you know, actually I do a fair amount of work on my own. I maintain certifications. I just feel like if we're teaching classes where we're encouraging students to get the certifications, or at least saying you've got the opportunity to do it, I maintain my certifications too. So it's continual study, which I kind of like. It's kind of one of the reasons I like education is because I like, you know, learning. So yeah, that's an important part of it. Yes. I think the main issue is you know, being available and helpful for your students. I mean, that's kind of the main. I mean, there's several different areas, and I think that there's distinguished professors that are very much involved in all aspects of the college, which I've done some over the last 20 years. I've done my fair share. But particularly now, my focus is on the students, being available to the students, and helping them be successful. And that's just kind of where the focus is. And so I think that's one aspect of, you know, the distinguished professor.
So being in the IT department also, I love having there to help me with my
Yeah.
a lot of the stuff you talk about is way over my head even. So again, I appreciate how you helped me over the years. But when Jay asked about how we keep up with it, Ben was instrumental, and I'm surprised you didn't, you weren't here, in the iTech grant, which is like a 5 or 6 year grant many years ago.
Exactly.
Where we got 3 classes. I mean, I don't know how often they were offered, but it was funding for us to go to week-long classes completely funded by this grant. And I would do 2, 3, 4 classes a year, and it didn't hurt that they put us on Daytona Beach. That was awfully nice, but it was incredible. That was an
Yeah.
incredible grant, and we all just were able to meet our IT skills and come back and share with the students.
Yep. And there have been a number of grants that were related, particularly with faculty development, and I've been involved in a lot of those too. So.
So not only are you helping yourself keep up with the information, you're helping the rest of the school.
Yeah. I'm not very good at tooting my horn. I'm sorry.
Well, concerning the app, because I get, I think I'm bad about this. I'm a little too available. Do you think that you have no boundaries and you're maybe too available for students?
The one thing about it is I mean, I can see it. If I want to put it away, I haven't put it in syllabus, and I'm going to be available 24, you know, 7 days a week. So normally I'll look at it if it's something that I can answer really quickly and it's not a very good question from that standpoint, I'll do it. If it's something that, okay, I probably know what the situation is, let me look at the screenshot, let me see if I can take care of it quickly, then I'll do it. If it's something that's not a very good question, or they're complaining more than anything else, I may wait until, you know, a more appropriate time when I sit at my desk and figure out what I want to say. Because you have to handle those a little differently sometimes.
All right. Well,
Thank
you very much. And we'll have a short break, and at 2:30, it will be our last presentation from Michael Hoover. Hello? Whoa! I'd say that was one. It's time for our final presentation. So if everybody would find their seats and settle down. Class? It's Valentine's Day, and I know you have other plans. Okay, our final presentation will be Michael Hoover, and here he is. That's it. It's on you.
So I'm Michael Hoover. Do I really need to use this, or can you hear me? Okay. Oh, okay. All right. So, how many of you recall when you were in undergraduate school that you took an American government class? How many of you did so because it was required? When I say required, I mean you had to literally take it. You couldn't take it. You couldn't, like, for example, take sociology class instead of American government. You literally had to take American government. You didn't have to. Okay. So fewer than 20% of colleges and universities in the United States require a U.S. or American government course as a core requirement to graduate. Less than 20%. You may say to yourself, okay, what's the big deal? It's called political democracy. And I think with respect to that, it raises the level of concern that people have had in recent decades about the low voter responses among younger people. In the old days, we used to think that once somebody reached 25, then their turnout would start to go up at the polls. And it still is the case, but not as much as it once was. So there's concern that there's at least a portion of a generation that's losing out on what's called civic virtue. Go all the way back to Aristotle. With all the warts that Aristotle had, he had some interesting things to say. And one of the things that he had to say is that the political environment should reflect one's sense of oneself and well-being in relationship to the community welfare. So as it says there, education can develop good citizenship. Good citizens play an active role in public affairs. So that dates to Aristotle, that dates to the ancient Greeks. That is still worthwhile today as a means of approaching, as individuals, our relationship to our community, to our nation, to one another, even in what appear to be not necessarily political situations. The framers. We tend to revere them. They're oftentimes portrayed as paragons of civic virtue. Many of them thought they were civically virtuous. But the Constitution that they wrote doesn't provide any means by which to promote civic virtue. It's true, James Madison fought at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia in 1787 to create a national university. He didn't succeed. George Washington, when he gave what would later be recognized as the first State of the Union address, he called for the creation of a national university. At the end of his second term, when he was leaving what amounted to his last State of the Union address, he called for again, and in fact, he left thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in his will to use as seed money to start a national university. Now, of course, none of these things came to pass, and maybe we don't need a national university today since we have 1,000 or so colleges and universities. Thomas Jefferson is the one who probably gets the most attention of the framers with respect to his interest in education. He also was in favor of a national university. However, he got so frustrated with getting anything done, unable to get anything done, that what he did is he decided to establish his own college, which of course is the University of Virginia. Now, go back to what I said a few minutes ago. Less than 20% of colleges and universities require American government as a core course. Guess which one of them is? He must be rolling over in his grave. He must be really agitated to know that the school that he created, that was in part designed to create civic virtue and political leadership, you don't have to take an American government class in order to graduate from UVA. Notice there's only a few states in the United States that offer or that require a U.S. government course. Now, the differences among the list of universities there is pretty significant. For example, the California State University System, CSU, which has been around for about 50 years, it's the largest higher education system in the country. It has prided itself for years, go back to when it was established in the 60s, on requiring one U.S. government course and one American history course as a requirement for everybody. Interestingly enough, there's a debate going on right now in the California State University system to reduce one or the other of those two classes. And some people say, well, you know, the general ed requirement is so filled up anyway, how can we necessarily, they've been doing it for 50, 60 years. When did this, you know, all of a sudden become an issue of sorts that we're going to take half of those requirements away? Texas requires you to take U.S. federal government and Texas government. So most of those states require one of government and one of history. Notice that it's been proposed in South Dakota and Tennessee, but it's not passing either. So what about Florida? Back in 2018, the state legislature, in its infinite wisdom, enacted the Florida civic literacy requirement. So 2018. You can take either student can take either American government or American history to satisfy the requirement, or they can take a CLEP test, they can take an AP test, or they can take a civic literacy exam that was created by the State Board of Education to satisfy the requirement. So, first of all, going back to the previous slide, there's not many states that require. Since not many states require, not many universities do. Most universities and colleges, including Seminole's before 2018, Seminole, was you had to have 6 hours of social science credit, and it could be in one of several different fields. So some people would never take American government, or some people would never take psychology, as the case may be. So you can satisfy that by passing the exams. What's the impact of college on political participation? And it's important to approach this from a couple of different directions. For example, we know that somebody who's been to college and didn't necessarily graduate is still more likely to vote than someone who didn't go to college and only has a high school degree or even perhaps less, which is pretty significant. Now, is there a tremendous increase in voter turnout among someone who's been to college for 1 year? No, it's not very large. It gets larger the more people are in college. You know, it's kind of interesting to think that the highest voting turnout among college students in the United States is, guess which field? Political science. You would expect that to be the case, I think, given what we study. So the gap between non-voting and voting gets larger the higher the level of education. Now, this is a multivariate kind of equation, so obviously you cannot only look at education, you have to look at age, you have to look at religion, you have to look at income. I mean, income and education essentially are correlates for social class in the United States. But people who've been to college, and then people who've been to more than 2 years, people who've graduated with a BS or BA degree, people who've been postgraduate school, master's degree, PhD. 80% of the people with a PhD in the United States in 2016 voted. 40% of those who had a high school degree or less voted. So again, I don't want to make that a singular assertion, but it's an important thing to consider. So people understand politics better once they've been to college. They understand it even better if they've had an American government class. They're more likely to vote, and they're more likely to engage in other ways. And so one way of approaching college and political participation is to do so in terms of coursework. But there's another way. And some of you may recall your own time in college and university. It's a pretty active environment a lot of the time. And there's a lot of politics that takes place. And students have an opportunity not only to learn in a more formal setting, but they have an opportunity to join political organizations. They have an opportunity to take part in a variety of activities that lead really one to, once they leave college, it influences them for the rest of their lives. Political activists in the United States are likely to have been college graduates. And this is true whether you're talking about the left or the right. So, higher education should have a civic purpose. By civic purpose, what we mean is the facilitating of civic virtue, understanding the relationship between my own well-being and the well-being of my community. Civic literacy is part of the development of civic virtue. Civic literacy means that I do understand. I understand that I have an opportunity to do this or to do that, to play out a political strategy in this way versus that, another way. So I've ended here with liberty, equality, and democracy. If you go back to the early 1830s, this cat named Alexis de Tocqueville, French aristocrat, toured around the country for about 8 months. He went back and he wrote this famous book called Democracy in America. And it's about this thick, and it's one of those books that very few people actually read because it's too thick, but they like to say that they've done so they spout the title. There's actually a second edition of the book, which even fewer people have left. But to make my point, Tocqueville believed, as he went back to France, that Americans cherished 3 basic political values. And guess which ones they were? Liberty, equality, and democracy. And keep in mind, he's here in the 1830s. 30% of the population is enslaved. Yet he sees something in the town halls and the community meetings and other such things that Americans seem to relish those 3 premises. If you take a survey today, I guarantee you that if you're trying to ask about what the chief values Americans hold politically, it's those 3. They may not necessarily agree what equality means all the time, but they basically hold 90% plus in each instance. 90% plus. I believe in liberty, equality, and democracy. And being in that kind of a situation makes the possibility of civic virtue conceivable. Thanks.
So thank you very much. Now we're going to have inquiry from the committee.
In your classroom, how often do you have to referee political arguments?
Oh, most every class. Yeah, because I facilitate conflict. That's my role. It's one of my roles, I think. But yeah, about every class session.
And do you teach anything else but government?
I've taught political theory, taught political ideology, I taught international relations, I taught state and local politics, I taught comparative politics. I have, in a sense, taught across the discipline.
The reason I ask is, I think, again, when we're in different departments, I know you teach history, I know that you teach, but I honestly, I don't know we have. So are all those courses you just mentioned, ones that we teach here? Or
Yes, some of them not very often, but they're on the books.
So it makes me also wonder, do you have a lot of students that are just coming, like I saw an older couple walking in one night, and I thought, oh, I wonder what they're going to take. I need some your classes.
I've had older students throughout my career.
Except it would be really educational
Yeah.
and interesting, but not like going to an electrical engineering class or, you know what I mean? I just think it would be more interesting. My
So, do because your courses require or mandated to be able to students that actually want to be there?
I think that that's become more so in the last couple of years. You know, the idea that you can opt out of this by taking an exam sort of defeats the purpose. Now, you know, you might make 4 out of 5 on the AP, but that doesn't replace sitting in a classroom, engaging the professor, but engaging with your other students as well. Just simply can't do that. Yeah.
Follow up on that, do you encourage your students to take their politics beyond the classroom?
Yes.
To go to, you know, local city hall,
Yes.
things like that?
Yes. Yes.
Share any experiences?
Well, I mean, over time, I've had students go to local government meetings. I've had students go to the political parties in the area. I've had speakers come and talk to the classes. I took a group of students down to Channel wasn't Spectrum, it was something else back then, during one of Obama's State of the Union addresses, and the students participated on TV. It was pretty cool. No, I haven't done that. Though I did stand out. Never mind. Some of you probably remember what I was about to say. Yes. It's really just the Socratic method. I mean, it's just basically, they say something, I ask a question. They say something, I ask a question. And it begins to, you can see it, you can see it in their face. They begin to move in the direction that I would like for them to, and that anybody should like for them to. So, yeah, it works. Well, I've been working quietly here for a long time. And I think to reach this level, potentially, really does require some recognition. And I guess the recognition might be coming now.
So, yes, in your teaching philosophy, we just described this in Socratic method. You say that your goal, of course, is not to please everybody, but not to tell students what to do, which you have. And of course, but you do have some values that you're trying to teach, right?
Sure.
Civic literacy is itself a value, and it sounds like this presentation and your classes are like an argument for that
Yes.
to participate.
Yes.
But and the two people who've taken a public science class are more likely to participate professionally. Could you possibly, for example, Steve Miller, I think, was political science in California, and of course, he is now, I would say, in a very dangerous and scary position and is hurting lives. So, could you possibly be, when you're trying to engage students and get them to participate, is there a danger, though, that you could be helping someone, just playing devil's advocate,
I think.
to not make wrong decisions?
I think for the, I think.
Some people I don't want to be civically engaged.
No, but I think that my experience has been that those kind of situations, those students bring that with them to the classroom, which makes for some interesting stuff and some potentially explosive stuff. I'm not afraid to tell them what I think. So when I say I ask a question, and at some point I say to them, well, see. So I'm not afraid and I'm not intimidated by that, but I think that for the most part, students in that situation, who, by the way, I don't think Duke is really very proud that he graduated from there, but I think that they bring it with them for whatever reasons, what their background is. And do I consciously try to change someone like that? No. there's an old adage. You spend time with the people that you might be able to win. You spend no time with the people outside the framework.
So thank you for participating. And the next step is the committee will get together, and I'm sure that Dr. Ross will follow up shortly. Certainly.
Yeah, just to finish up, first of all, I want to thank the committee that read through all of those applications, and all quite impressive. And they've spent a great deal of time. I've enjoyed all the presentations today, so their next charge is they will recommend to me which of those should be distinguished professors, and then I'll recommend to the president, and then the president will recommend to the board, and so it goes. So that is the process from here. I would say, and I'm trying to remember the timeline, I think it's May, by the May board meeting, that should make its way there. So thank you all for a great afternoon. I loved this. Can we do this next Friday too? So, thank you.